Hope everybody's doing well. It's a lovely day here in Durham, North Carolina. It wasn't all that lovely on yesterday when we had all of that rain and all along those lines. So it was definitely an interesting day on that particular day and definitely enjoyed it. Even though we had a big event here at the Hayti Heritage Center where I'm coming at y'all at from today. So we actually had a reception that was going on, a red carpet reception that was featuring lawman Bass Reeves and actually one of the people that was playing the wife of the main character, that being Bass Reeves, who was a deputy back in the Reconstruction era, and all in that space is a Hillside graduate. So one of our graduates from here and all in that space. It was great to see them and to see what they had going on and all along those lines. So definitely glad to see that. And we also had some other things that were taking place as well. So definitely a number of things have been happening in the community and with the community and all along those lines. So always glad to have these kind of things taking place. As a matter of fact, a group of friends of mine are probably, at least one of them is over there at County Stadium watching a football game because there is of course, we're getting to go into bowl season, and there are championship games, even of the small conferences. So, Louis Everhart is the son of Jess Everhart, who is a friend of mine and a friend of many here in the area and her son is playing in that championship game, ironically in his home area because he is, I think, a graduate of Millbrook, which is a school in our state capital of Raleigh. But he also lives part of his time in Durham, so he's over here playing at County Stadium, and I think that they played the championship game there last year, and this might be a rematch, and I don't remember who won that game and all along those lines. But looks like there's some folks out there having a good time enjoying the game out there, and definitely I was catching it. And right now, Kaiser is winning 17-7, so that is good to know that the team of a son of a friend of mine is actually winning. So I'm sure she's probably over there screaming and yelling and enjoying the game and all in that space. So that's some of the things that are going on. Is there a number of things that take place even here at the Hayti Heritage Center regularly? As a matter of fact, the Kwanzaa celebration will be taking place in the not too distant future and all in that space. Matter of fact, a week from tomorrow will be the Kwanzaa celebration. And I probably could play the role, but I don't want to play the role. But they're doing Black Santa on the 20th to the 24th, and they will be here, and a number of kids will be over there trying to say whether they're on the naughty or the nice list and all in that space. And I've got some amazing guests, and they're going to talk about hypnotherapy and other things that they've got going on in their life. And who knows, maybe they've been on the naughty or nice list as well. But we're going to see how the holidays are treating them. I understand that my guests might even have some ties to North Carolina, since I think they said they have friends in the Asheville area and all along those lines. So I'm going to bring in my guests and see what they've got going on in their world. And always good to have amazing guests here on the radio show as part of Pod TV and all the things that we are doing here on a regular basis. So definitely glad to have my guest, Christy, here as well as her friend, and we'll learn more about what they've got going on. But a lot of people are oftentimes wondering about how to deal with different changes and life, whether it's trying to break habits. I know that I probably could stand to lose some weight, and a number of people will be doing their New Year's resolutions. And sometimes when they decide to do resolutions or to make a life changing habit, they decide to go into hypnotherapy or other ways to do it as well. Because I do know that a lot of times folks, even when they're thinking about their New Year's resolutions, whether that is to stop in smoking, which was never a problem for me. I was never involved in any of the smoking, whether it was the illicit kind or the other kind as well. But definitely sometimes you might want to lessen your intake on fried food or get out and exercise more or do other things that hypnotherapy can help with and all along those lines. So I'm just wondering what got you into it, Christy, and if you want to tell us a little bit about your friend as well. But I'm sure some folks are going like, wonder what got her into hypnotherapy.
Oh, I'd love to talk
Mm.
about that. But first, I want to introduce Robert. This is Robert Nanez.
Hello, I'm Robert. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure
He's a,
meeting you as well.
he became a hypnotherapy client of mine a little over a year ago. And so that's what our story is about today, and it's what the book is about that I'm writing called 31 Conversations with an Alien. But having given you that little teaser, I'll answer your question. How did I get into hypnotherapy? I'm a lifelong musician, and I was living in the New York area and making my living as a musician and a music teacher. And I had happen in my life an event that didn't make any sense to me at all. It was actually it was a type of abduction, but it was my young son who was taken from me. And this was for me a huge tragedy. I needed to find out what in the world was happening. So, a few years after he was taken, I sought out the help of a hypnotherapist who specialized in past life regressions. And I saw during this past life regression a lifetime where the three people involved in my life at that time, myself included, um, we had lived together and we had a relationship, the three of us, husband, wife, and son. And there was actually a very dramatic incident, a murder involved. And that past life explained everything. And even though it didn't change my situation at the time, it gave me what I felt was the truth about my really very unfortunate circumstances at that time. And it gave me peace of mind. I still remember that past life regression as if it was yesterday. So that's, I decided I wanted to be on the inside of hypnotherapy. That was in 1994.
Wow. Just along those same lines and everything, and that's actually come back to what you just mentioned with even Robert and everything. I know a lot of times people are wondering if they have had past lives and if they had their past lives, if they can connect to those past lives. And a lot of times people will be somewhat skeptical and everything because I've had friends of mine that have felt that they might have been Cleopatra or that they might have been even Attila the Hun or other things that are in our history books or maybe even some more recent historical figures. For all I know, there might be people that literally think that they could have been Bass Reeves, who was a well-known lawman here in this, in America, as I think he was in Oklahoma and was part of the whole narrative around law after Reconstruction and after slavery had ended and everything. But I just wonder how easy is it to get in touch with the past lives? Should we even be trying to get in touch with our past lives and all along those lines? Because that's something that I know sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. I personally think that's why a lot of people are afraid of mortality and all along those lines. But I just wondering how much should we try to tap into who we might have been in another life and what kind of conclusive proof do you have that these lives exist?
So many people come to me for hypnotherapy because they want to know what their purpose in life is. And by seeing past lives where they have clear visions of who they were and what their specialty was, what their circumstances were, then they get introduced to their purpose in life at the current time. I'm going to hand this over to Robert because Robert has had the most extraordinary past life, except it wasn't the usual idea of a past life. He was this is his first incarnation as a human. And so Robert went under hypnosis and he was taken back to when he was an alien, an extraterrestrial visiting the earth. And what
Eye-opening.
Wow.
It was an eye-opening experience. I knew something had happened, and I knew the only way I could find out, because my memory wasn't there, but I knew something had happened. So I sought out a hypnotherapist, and I came across Christy.
I gotcha.
And she put me under and took me on a past life regression and asked me to describe myself. And when I described myself, I didn't describe myself as a human. So I described myself as a gray. A gray is an extraterrestrial. On the taller side, the bigger side, they're about 8 foot tall, 7 to 8 feet. Bluish gray in color, large eyes. I had 3 fingers, 2 slits for nasal opening. I didn't have no earlobes, so it was riveting. It it changed the way I thought for quite some time. Still does, thinking that my past life was not of a human.
It's interesting you say that, Robert, because one of the things that I actually have a friend of mine is actually a very close friend that actually believes that he is both not fully of this world. So he actually thinks that he might be partially what we consider human, but partially of another part of the universe and all along those lines. So I just wondering, is that something even in your past life regressions that you and Christy have found? Is that there are a number of people that are walking this planet that might not even be 100% human and all in that space? Because I know my friend that is in the, ironically, Christy, you'll love this, he's in the music lanes as well, but he definitely is in tune to his spirituality. So I was just wondering, how much of this notion do you think there is? Because I've even heard a lot of people talk about how they're frustrated by the world as we know it. And some people will even say that we are not in tune enough with our own mortality, our own notion of who we are. And I've heard a lot of people that even feel that there are zombies walking among us because a lot of people are being somewhat listless in their existence and everything. But I just wondering
Exactly.
y'all's take on that, because a lot of times people are maybe not fully of this world.
It's so true. It is. I never thought that I always thought that if I had a second life before my life now, it would have been human.
Mhm.
But it wasn't. Finding out through hypnosis, it was Christy was able to unlock the archives and find out what was really happening in both past life and in this life.
Right.
And it has to do with the DNA as well of people. We are discovering through hypnosis that Robert had only ever lived as an extraterrestrial. So it wasn't like he was human and then he was a gray and went to another planet. He was only an extraterrestrial before he incarnated. And there was a very dramatic incident when he was in the gray form that caused him to be damaged. And he was going to leave his gray form anyway. So it was decided by the higher ups, and it was something that Robert agreed to evidently as well, that he would become a human and he would turn his life over to experimentation. And under hypnosis, we discovered that that's exactly what has been happening to him his whole life since he first saw an alien. He first was visited by an alien being at the age of 5.
Oh,
I
wow.
was 5 years old when I first encountered them in this lifetime. And it came to my room. I was woken up. I heard something by the window or the sliding door, and I saw them. It was a gray. I got frightened. My brother was right next to the window, and I couldn't wake him up. And what they do, and you'll find out that this happens to quite a bit of people, that they will put out the rest of the family members. They will be in like a trance, and where they can't move, they don't know what's going on. And
Hmm.
it's kind of weird what they do. And at that point, I ran away and hid in my mother's bathroom, and it communicated through uh, telepathy,
Oh, wow.
and he was able to communicate with me telepathically.
The alien,
So
yeah.
I came back out, and I saw him, and he put his hand out, and he said, "I will never harm you."
Hmm. Hey,
And
Robert, along those same lines, and I'm just guessing, and you and Christy can correct me if I'm wrong, but in looking at you over the uh, internet and over this interview space and everything, it looks like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you have some Latin background and all in that space. And I know that there are a number of cultures that are very much in tune with their kind of connection to the ancestors, but also connections to those that are not from here. There are some people that have made the argument that the pyramids could not have been built without some extraterrestrial aid in Africa. And I've heard similar kind of conversations around the Aztecs and some of the things that were built by the Mayans and others in Latin America. So I just wonder, one, if I'm correct about your heritage, and two, if you can speak maybe to the connection between the those that are from other planets and some of our minority communities, and also just the connection to the ancestors in general.
I am Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
And
come from
Irish. And Irish.
and Irish as well.
Gotcha.
And I'm going to go back a little bit. When Christy took me on a past life regression, we were in the, I say we were, speaking as a gray, we were in the Yucatan Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, I would accompany, as a gray, the scientist. And the scientists are they're the brains of the operation. They're the smaller aliens. And at one point, under hypnosis, I was telling Christy, I know what it feels like to be a god, because the way these people look at me and revere me in my gray form. Only the hierarchy would come up and talk to us. And it felt really, it felt as if I was there. It felt really strange, but yet I could feel that this did happen. It was a remarkable experience.
And then actually, let me just add to that, once Robert came for hypnosis and he discovered the truth about his, well, you could call it heritage, his DNA, actually, then he began to tell his family a little bit about it, because this is something he'd never talked about. He had very, very strange incidents happening to him throughout his life as a human, but he figured he was, crazy, right?
Yes, there's that stigma of you being crazy.
Right.
So that's why he came to hypnosis. And then as he began to tell his family about what he was discovering, it turned out that they had also seen these odd lights. They had been abducted. They had had very odd experiences that they couldn't quite explain in normal ways. And so it turns out, I've been reading a lot of books written by people who've been abducted. And it turns out that abductions often occur in families and also even in friend groups.
My mother she didn't tell me for the longest time until I started talking to her and telling her about my sessions with Christy. And my mother finally told me that she was coming home from her and her sister from feeding the homeless at the church.
Right.
And they were about half a mile from the house, and she had a fog bank in the road. Those are rare in Tucson, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that the car lifted up, and her sister became very dumbfounded. And then my mother said that they could start seeing, the tops of the roofs, and that was it.
Yeah.
She lost about an hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours of time. My daughters have seen them inside the house within a blue light. They don't like talking about it. They're young. They're in their 20s, and they get scared. And I don't really push them on it because I know it bothers them. But I've never told her what I've seen, but yet they told me exactly what I have seen. And it just seems very odd that they're telling me the same thing without me telling them.
Yeah.
So it's
That's fascinating and everything. Just in that same space and everything, just out of curiosity, because a couple of things you're saying that have got me interested in a couple of questions. One is, and I alluded to one of them earlier, and I'll get to that in a second, but you mentioned time and this kind of like suspension of time. And there are some people that would argue that we spend too much time getting fixated on time, and some of the other cultures and some of the other universes and all in that spaces, they may not have those same constraints with time. So just wondering your take on the human population and its fixation with time.
What we discovered under hypnosis was that Robert had a partner when he was a gray, and that partner actually came through speaking to him telepathically, and then Robert would tell me what the gray was saying to him. And so this is why the book will be called 31 Conversations with an Alien. That alien, that gray, who we named Fred, it said so many times, our concept of time, our human concept of time, is completely different from the aliens' experience of time. And so there were questions that I would ask the gray while we were in session. Usually the sessions would last an hour as Robert lay on the couch and was in a very, very deep state of consciousness. The alien would say, "Oh, humans are so primitive compared to us. And your concept of time, I can't answer that question. That's a repetitive question because time is completely different for you than it is for us."
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see where that would be an interesting thought that they would have, and all along those lines. And what you mentioned earlier, that I was going to get back to, because I am one of those people, and not everybody is, but I consider myself to be somewhat of an empath and definitely have an understanding of people's emotions and things along those lines. But I'm also very plugged into the ancestors, and definitely some of those that have passed on in my own life, whether it was my grandmother, who was a historical figure in the library space, actually created the first African American library in our state capital, and all along those lines, or whether it is Papa Chuck Davis, who was a family friend. Actually, we have a couple of artwork. There's a mural, and there's also like a marionette like figure that is honoring him and his legacy of understanding African dance, and definitely a number of others, including Phil Freeland, who is one of the architects of the African American Cultural Arts Center there in Washington, D.C., that were friends and that I still feel are part of my journey now and everything, because I feel that they still talk to me, or that I get kind of inspiration from them, whether it's in dreams or in other kinds of communication forms. But I was just wondering, both of yours take on the importance of being connected to your ancestors.
Well, I feel my I took care of my parents in the last years of their life, and they were very, very precious to me, and they still are. And they're both with me all the time. Oh, makes me emotional. Um, and I have seen them when I've been under hypnosis, but also I feel them all the time, and their influence is very, very strong in my life. Um, how do you feel about your ancestry? And
You touched on that, and it's my grandmother and my great grandmother were able to sense things. My
Mhm.
mother can sense things. My mother, spirits, past life, people that are been past, ghosts and stuff. And I got that now. So yeah, I am in touch very much with my grandmother and my great grandmother. Well, it's how you pick that topic. Yeah, I am, and I realize that with my grandmother and my great grandmother.
Yeah, yeah, that's
so
interesting.
even with your alien DNA and your alien past, you also have this other influence in your
Yes,
life,
definitely.
the human part. So that's Robert. When we first met, when Robert first walked through the door the first day, I realized that he was a very sincere person, and I could believe everything he was telling me, even though his stories from his life are extraordinary. The events that have occurred to him, just as you always say, they're not normal.
Normal. Yes.
But but I believed him, and I still believe him. I mean, why would he? How could anybody make up 36 surgeries?
Mm.
Yes. No, 34.
34.
34 surgeries. I've had 34 surgeries throughout my life, and I always come through. I've
Wow.
had a number of different experiences. I've gotten things on my phone, different photos, different experiences, and you always try to debunk them. I always try to and say, "You're not crazy. You're not crazy. This ain't really happening," and it is. It does happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and this is a thing, Mark.
Mhm.
I really want to make this point.
Mhm.
When Robert talked to me on the phone the first time, he said, I've been wanting to go under hypnosis because I want to believe I'm not crazy
Right.
for all the things that have happened to me. I've been thinking that I must be crazy. So I know there are people listening who think that very strange things are happening to them, and they must just be crazy. They must be hallucinating. But it's a time in our development as a species, I believe, that we're preparing ourselves to understand our real history, and that is that we have been from the beginning of time influenced by extraterrestrials.
Wow. Just along those same lines, I know that even in the religious circles, and I consider myself more spiritual than religious, there are some folks that will say that some of the things that are even talked about in either the Bible or the Quran or a number of other religious groups, including some of the Eastern religions like the Buddhist and Hindu, that a lot of these activities and even some of these prophets and prophecies were actually coming from another part of the universe and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, in your hypnotherapy, what is your thoughts around that? Because I do know that there are some folks that are thinking that some of these miracles, whether it is more modern times, like what I mentioned with the Aztecs and the pyramid, or whether you want to go all the way back to Jesus and Muhammad and some of the other prophets, that there might have been influenced by some of the people that were in other parts of the universe. But I was just wondering y'all's thoughts on that, and whether that is a part of the narrative, even from a religious standpoint, that we don't pay enough attention to.
Tell Mark what Fred said about religion and structure. And
Fred, our alien who who communicated with us for 31 conversations, stated very clearly that the extraterrestrials decided at a very ancient period of Earth's time that humans needed to have other humans. We need to gather. We need to have common goals and beliefs, and so they created religions. And because there were extraterrestrials, different types of extraterrestrials in different parts of the world, we have such a huge variety of religions. And if
a diversity, you would say, huh?
Such a diversity, and yes, different beliefs, but every person who is a Christian thinks, well, the Bible that's God's word, and we have to live by the Bible. Actually, there's a book series out right now by a man named Paul Wallis, Wallis, who was an Anglican priest for 31 years. And then he began to look at the Bible differently, and he finds and cites tremendous numbers of verses, chapters and verses in the Bible, that if you look at it from, well, extraterrestrials were here, you will find over and over that these are actual references in the Bible to extraterrestrials. And of course, we all know that there's a theory that many things were removed from the Bible for whatever reasons all along. So, yeah, if that answers your question.
No, that does answer the question. One of the other things I know that sometimes people will do, and I'd love to hear y'all thoughts about this, is oftentimes when we are encountering things that we don't understand, it makes us afraid, and sometimes we try to alter it. I've even said on this show, and I'll say it again now, that there have been times that there is this notion of deja vu and everything, and there have been times that even I have had those deja vu moments. I remember one many years ago when I was going to a journalism camp, and it was actually at UNC, and it was several of us from a 4 or 5 state radius and everything. And even before I met the individuals, I had already met them because I had seen them in a past dream or something. So like I knew everybody was in that area before I actually physically met them. But I've also had times where I've been in having an uneasy feeling, and literally I might do something as simple as if I'm at a dining table, move a salt shaker to kind of change the chemistry or the notion of what I remember, and all along those lines. So some people may say that that's a little bit eccentric, but I was just wondering y'all's take on that, because I sometimes think that you can try to alter something that you are uncomfortable with. But I was just wondering y'all's take on that.
Not quite sure what you're referring to, but as I listen to you, I'm thinking that you would be a great hypnosis subject, first of all. You would go under easily. And I'm wondering if you're a Pisces.
Close. I'm another water sign. I'm a Cancer. So Cancer, Pisces, and Scorpio are the 3 water signs and everything. I actually jokingly call because Scorpios have this notion of being very kind of playboyish, for lack of a better term, and I call those Scorpio. I'll call those Scorpio light. So we have some of the same wild characteristics, but we're a little bit more subtle in what we do. So they might be known as being a little bit more outspoken in some of their activities. Where
The
we
Scorpios, three definitions of the Scorpio is sexual, engendering, and suspicious.
right, and the sexual part is what I'm alluding to. I think Cancers can be just as much sexual, but we are not as outspoken about it as our Scorpio brother.
And maybe don't cause as much trouble as the Scorpios.
That
Don't
I
hate
would agree with. My
Scorpios.
brother is a Scorpio, so that I would agree with, and he was the one that was more of the troublemaker in the sense of like the one that would get in trouble and all along those lines. But
Sex- Cancers are very home loving, and
Mhm.
my mother was a Cancer, and that was her life.
Mhm.
Well, it was the home. But you may have some. I'm going to stick with my theory that you have some Pisces in you. Clearly, you're a compassionate person, and you almost have the physical build of other Pisces that I know. So it'll be interesting because in the chart you might have Pisces. They're very psychic.
And I definitely think that there's some psychic things that go on sometimes, everything. But one of the things that I was curious about is, and you even alluded to it in one of the questions that you had mentioned to me and everything that we could talk about, everything. But I do know that sometimes people, when they think about hypnotherapy, they know that, and even when we think about the hypnotherapy that used to exist in the um, carny kind of world and all along those lines, is that some people are afraid that it is too much of a show. And how do you differentiate between that it is real and that it is fake? Because I'll just give an example. I know this is a different kind of thing, but literally I used to go to a holiness church, and at the same beat of the drum, the same gentleman would go running around the church. So after a while, we took it not as seriously as we might have taken if it didn't look staged, because we do know that sometimes things can be staged even when we think about religion and people catching the spirit and everything. So I just wonder, as a hypnotherapist, how do you make sure that you are seeing authentic communication?
Well, I can say that in Robert's case,
Mhm.
when he first came to me and he had never been to a hypnotherapist and he'd never been under hypnosis, he went immediately into an altered state. He laid down. Explain what you do with your breathing.
I'm going to start a little bit further back.
Right.
I told Christy, are you going to use a stopwatch like you would see in the old movies, or a pocket watch, and it pendulum, it act like a pendulum.
Right.
And I told Christy, good luck putting me under, because I didn't really think she could put me under.
And you never lay still, you said.
Yeah, and I'm very hyper. I got to keep moving and moving. Well, Christy started putting me under a relaxed state, and I started doing my breathing, and next thing I know is
It's an hour later.
it was an hour and 10 minutes later. I brought 3 of my family members. I brought my brother one time, my nephew, and a cousin by the name of David
To watch us.
to watch
the
and
session.
to interact. And all 3 of them said, that's not my family member, because he doesn't lay like that. He doesn't talk like that. He's motionless. The only thing that was moving was my lips, right, Christy?
Absolutely. Robert was so deep. He was in this somnambulist state, and not everybody can go that deep. And I had no idea, what he was going to be capable of. But there he was, completely out and barely able to move his lips even. Sometimes I would say, could you speak a little bit louder, because I was recording everything. And I still didn't catch what he was saying because he was speaking so softly. He was so deep into a different consciousness state that he could barely speak. That is extraordinary. And at that time, that very first meeting we had, the other being came through, his old partner from when he was a gray. That being began to speak through him almost immediately. And that was the new experience. That's when the conversations with the alien began right away.
And when I was under, if Christy didn't tell me that I was going to remember everything, I wouldn't. It's if I would taken a long nap.
Yeah.
She would have to say, "Well, I was under hypnosis. When you wake up, you will remember everything that happened during our hypnosis session."
And there were times when I put him under just to go back and lay on the table in the spaceship where he was experimented on. And we didn't invite his friend to come along and speak to us because both of us wanted to know exactly what was happening during these experiments on the spaceship. And several times when he went and began to describe what was going on, he began to describe the aliens who were working on him.
We call them the scientists.
We call them the scientists, for lack of a better word, because they were the more intelligent beings. The Greys are actually the warriors. Fred always told us that all Fred did was he retrieved humans and he protected humans.
So protected the scientists, protected the ship.
Yeah.
They did maintenance. They did things that you would do, keeping the ship
shape.
Ship shape, exactly.
So when,
for a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when Robert was under and just telling me about his experience, what they were doing to him, there were times when it was so frightening and so disturbing to him what they were doing that I had to almost yell at him and demand that he come back to consciousness because I felt like it wasn't safe for him to relive what was going on.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because speaking of safety and consciousness and all along those lines, I do know that there are probably people that are afraid to go back in time and afraid to go back into the past lives because they're afraid of what they might have been. Because I imagine that nobody wants to be Jack the Ripper or Attila the Hun or Adolf Hitler or a number of those other kind of figures, or even been involved in some very horrid times in our lives, whether that's the Crusades or slavery or a number of other things as well. So I just wondered, within the hypnotherapy that you're doing, Christy, is that something that you've ever had to deal with, and how were the people able to come to terms with who they might have been that might not have been the most favorable person in a past life?
I haven't ever had anybody who was comparable to Hitler. Right. But I have worked with two women here where I'm living now who both had very frightening experiences. One was, the woman is in her 80s now, by the way. And so she's written her own story about this, but under hypnosis, she saw herself again as a 14-year-old girl in this life. This was not a past life, actually. In this life, under hypnosis, she was taken by by extraterrestrials and inseminated. And so even though as her real self, she had never had a sexual experience, she was pregnant.
She was like 14 years old, wasn't she?
14 years old. And so then 4 months later, there was a spontaneous abortion. And she was in a great deal of pain, woke up one morning and was no longer pregnant. So there are these strange things happening in our lifetimes with alien abductions. So that was when I put her under and she was beginning to experience being on the table and having that insemination done. She instantly, like after only a few minutes under, she sat straight up and said, "No, I'm not going to see this anymore. I don't want to see this." Wow. And that was the end of it. It was too disturbing. And so, yes, I ask my clients to step aside from the situation and just know that they're only observing so that they don't feel pain and they're not upset.
No, and along those same lines and everything, because that sounds very fascinating, because that would definitely be scaring everything. I know one of the things that people have been talking about, particularly these days, is this notion of adulting. We definitely saw it with all the things that are going on in life, and we're oftentimes concerned about our day-to-day life, trying to make ends meet, trying to make relationships work, and all along those lines. And there are some people that say that as we get further into adulthood, we lose that sense of play, that sense of childhood, and that sense of wonderment from childhood as well. And I'm sure that there are even some people in your own groups and in your own friend circles that are probably thinking to themselves that hypnosis is just another form of imagination and another form of kind of like creating our own reality. But I'm just wondering your thoughts around that. One, have we lost the ability to have that childlike wonderment, and should we keep that childlike wonderment? And how is hypnosis different from childlike wonderment as well? But I'd love to hear both of your thoughts, yours, Christy, and Robert's, around this as to whether we can maintain that childlike wonderment and also the differences between hypnosis and childlike wonderment.
Well, first of all, I think that we are discouraged the older we get to be in wonderment. And so we therefore suppress our imaginations a lot, unless we're such, creatively mature people who really, really need to create all the time. And so we go into our imaginations. But I think most people have to suppress that, leave it behind. But with hypnosis, almost every person I work with will start by saying, I see something, but I'm not sure. It might just be my imagination. And so I say, great, go with it. Because what is imagination? Maybe imagination is a suppressed past life. Actually, going under hypnosis helps us to access our higher self, our subconscious. And if we get in the way, like some people do, especially people who are doctors or lawyers or people who work with figures a lot, they're using the left part of their brain so much, and they maybe have just shut down the right side. So they may not feel like they have any imagination. They still do, but it's just turned off. And the people who are artists and singers and dancers and so forth and so on, they might be more able to actually reach their imagination, allow that subconscious to surface, because they're not so left brain oriented. Does that answer your question?
That did answer my question. Actually, I had a question about music, but before we get to that, I want to get to a couple of PSAs, and we'll be right back in about a few minutes. But I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. Hope y'all are enjoying it as well. But I'm just going to take a brief PSA break and everything, probably run about 2 or 3, and then we'll be right back.
Great, thank you. We'll wait.
It's happening again. The signs. Your mind's not yours. It's been taken over, and you're doing it again. When stress takes over, it takes over everything. Your mind, your body, your life. It's important to recognize the signs of stress before it takes over. Find tools to help you address your stress.
If you're watching this with your friends, you'll probably make a joke.
Because you know what you feel on the inside
isn't what you want people to know.
If you have to pretend to be happy,
find someone you trust and tell them.
If you get mad at things and you don't know why, or have thoughts about hurting yourself,
find someone you trust and tell them.
You are never alone when you share.
Seriously, people care about you.
It's okay to not understand what you're feeling.
And it's easy to think that you're all alone.
But you don't have to be.
You're never alone when you share.
Don't be ashamed to tell someone you trust what you're feeling.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Find someone you trust and tell them.
Tell a parent.
Tell a teacher. Tell a brother or sister.
Or just tell a friend.
You haven't done anything wrong.
Talk to someone.
Talk to someone.
It's how things get better.
Only going non-stop. I won't fold. everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
We're back. We've got Christy and Robert with us having this fascinating conversation. And along those lines, one thing that I was curious about, Christy, and it definitely will continue around some of the other things, even with hypnotherapy. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I've got several friends that are musicians, and you mentioned being a musician yourself as well. And I know a lot of my musician friends talk about how music is oftentimes used to unify people, that even with the divisiveness that we have in the world, a lot of times if people are enjoying a good concert, they don't care what a person's race, orientation, religious background, or a number of other things.
Gender.
All in that space. So I was just wondering your take around the importance of music in your own life and the relationship between music and hypnotherapy, because how do you make those connected? Because like you said, you're a professional musician, so I was just wondering how you make those connected and just your thoughts about music as a unifying force.
I think that what you're saying is absolutely true, that music is a unifying force, and sound started everything. So if we have the honor of having music as humans. Fred explained to us that there is no music in their world.
No art.
No color. Dance.
No emotions.
And no emotions and no gender. So there's not a whole lot that really thrills them. They don't understand emotions. They didn't understand Robert's emotions when he would be, depressed. They caused him to be depressed at times. They had no concept of what that might do to a human.
We're here on Earth. Music crosses all boundaries.
It does. And yeah. I do sound healing as well with drums and with crystal singing bowls. And so actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I taught at a theater school in New York City for 15 years, bringing people to Broadway. And I started using what I call toning during my singing technique classes. And so I would have the students stand in a circle and we would tone one unison pitch, and everybody would calm down. Some people would get visions. We would have this like chord that just seemed like it was streaming through our brains, and it got everybody ready for class. And then they could sing because they were relaxed and they were more open with their throat chakra. So I worked with my then partner for about 1.5 years using a crystal singing bowl, putting him under with this bowl. And he went back in time 25,000 years, and he viewed a tribe, an ancient tribe. He feels that they are his ancestors. And he saw every aspect of their lives, everything that you can imagine. As an observer, it wasn't a past life regression. He was time traveling, and he was remote viewing them, so that he was laying on the couch, but he was there in their presence for 1.5 years, and he saw them through 3 generations. And it was always this one crystal singing bowl that I played that took him back to those people.
You just mentioned that because, like I said, there is going to be dance class here, and part of the dance class will be African drumming, and I've got some other friends that are into different forms of drumming. So definitely drumming is a important part of that sound healing, and a lot of times people are involved in that. Also have some friends that are involved in the string instruments and a number of other instruments as well. But I just wonder how important is these different tones in your own healing and everything, and how much do you use music even in the hypnosis? Like, was there any music playing in the background, or do you have to keep everything very quiet and subdued in order to get the results that you want.
I'm so glad you brought up sound, because with Robert, I didn't use any music. I may have tried crystal bowl once, but he didn't need it because he went right out. But when it comes to sound, the sounds that you heard when you were laying on the table,
That one bowl sounded.
and not, yes.
Yeah.
So one day, I do this sound immersion, and Robert came to the sound immersion evening. There were maybe 6 or 7 other people there, and I started playing this one crystal bowl, and it set him into a torturous state of mind.
They would use sound to, the aliens would, or extraterrestrials, have a certain sound that will immobilize you. And when you're immobilized, that's when they start doing the different experiments. And some of these experiments were painful and traumatic. And that one sound that Christy started using and playing, it was the same sound that they would use to immobilize me. So that one, that particular, that wasn't a good, because it woke up those hidden memories of what had happened.
Mm-hmm. I had to stop playing that bowl, and I calmed him down, and then we went on with the evening, with the toning and the other crystal bowls. But that one sound, and also, didn't you always tell me that there was a sound that actually moved, it powered the ship?
Yes. It's a low frequency sound, almost like a humming sound, and that humming sound, it's coming through magnetic, and what makes it's a type of propulsion, and it's maybe I would like to say an anti-gravity by that sound. That's what's doing.
Sound is everything. Sound is
very big with them.
Sounds very big, and I know it's big in our culture as well. Now, Christy, I'm sure that you have done hundreds, if not thousands, of these hypnotherapies, and definitely have a variety of clients and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, and this may be an unusual question, but I come up with different questions as well. Is there a particular time frame or a particular individual that you are hoping to have a conversation with from the past that you haven't been in touch with yet, or a particular time frame that you haven't been able to tap into as of yet? So I just wondered if there's a time frame or a individual that you wish that you could have a conversation with that maybe you haven't had that opportunity as of yet.
That's a great question. That's something I really never thought about, but I guess that, a few people come to mind. I would love to be in touch with Mary Magdalene, for instance, to see what she has to say, because I have a feeling that Mary Magdalene, not Mother Mary from the Bible, but Mary Magdalene, who supposedly was Jesus' partner, I'd love to hear what she has to say about her experience with Jesus. I mean, I was raised very religious, and I'm not anymore. but yeah, that would be a character that I'd want to have a conversation with. But I'm going to take this opportunity to say to your listeners that if anyone feels like they're crazy because they're having these weird experiences, please reach out to me. You can find me through ChristyAndrews@gmail.com, and I will respond, and we can have a conversation about what's happening with you. And then I do hypnosis over the internet, because I don't want people. This is the reason Robert came in the first place. I mean, besides the fact that he wanted to clear up for himself what was going on.
And your listeners are probably not crazy. There are some things are probably going on.
I could definitely see that in
it. It would bring a new light to see, what's going on with them. They'll definitely find out, as I did.
Yeah.
Answered a lot of questions in my life.
And so that's what, it brought up so much. I remember you saying at the end of a session, you would say, the more answers we get,
yes,
the more questions I have. But basically it solved the puzzle of what is happening to me? Tell them what your father used to say, even when you were a child.
Yeah, my father said, this is not normal. You're not my kid. Someone else's stuff doesn't keep happening to him like that. I was always getting hurt, or something was happening to me. And my father would say that, that's not normal.
And these were experiments that the aliens felt completely free to do on Robert. They would, I remember you telling me about your all of a sudden having all of the signs that you were not low blood sugar, but diabetic.
Diabetic, yeah.
You were diabetic. They would infuse in you this craving for alcohol. And so you just had to have alcohol, and you'd never been that way before.
No. And then all of a sudden, it was just the next day it would stop. There were all kinds of experiments were done.
Things that had no explanation for.
Well, speaking of experiments being done, well, actually, a couple of things crossed my mind. One, I like the person that you wanted to talk to. That would be an interesting one because they definitely had a interesting relationship. Jesus and that particular Mary and everything. What I was going to ask, mention, and I've mentioned on a couple of shows, even on this network and everything, is I think it would be interesting to actually have a conversation with Mary and Joseph, because I am convinced that if what we don't hear, and maybe it's what's written in those secret scrolls and everything, is we know that there was the birth of Jesus, because that's all we told around Christmas time, and we know about the latter life, which was his latter life, because he didn't live that long, but his latter life was like his teen and years and young adult years when he was working all those miracles and all in that space. But in my mind, this is just me because I don't have any kids of my own, but I have 2 nephews and all of those lines. I'm thinking that at some point there had to be the Jesus that was doing the things that babies will do and being a kind of like disruptive and all in that space. So I want to know about that part of Jesus' life, because we know that he is definitely seen as this perfect individual, but even perfect individuals have a side where they are being a little cantankerous. So I'm thinking that maybe there was a cantankerous side that he had as well that we haven't heard about as well. But that's what
terrible twos.
The terrible twos, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now that would be interesting. As a parent, how would you describe your child Jesus?
Right, exactly. That's what I'm curious to hear, how they would describe him and everything, because I'm thinking they didn't have diapers back then, but they did have to change him and all along those lines. So I was thinking that there had to be sometimes that he was crying and being cantankerous. But like I said, I could be wrong. Maybe he was the Mr. Calm even in that childhood. But it would be interesting to find out what that case is. But this is my question for both you and Robert. We're having a lot of people that are very much concerned about something that is relatively new to us, even though a lot of people have said it's been here forever and that aliens might have even brought it and all along those lines. But I just wanted, in your conversation with Fred and some of the other folks that are part of the grade class that you were just talking about, what are their thoughts about the advancements of humanity in this day? Because we're hearing a lot of people that are talking about AI, they're talking about robots, they're afraid of robots taking over and all along those lines. So I just wondering, in your conversations with the Grays and others, are they just like can't figure out why we're even concerned because they are thousands, if not millions of light years ahead of us? Or what is their notion of where we are as a technological society?
Fred said we're still primitive.
Mm-hmm.
It takes days for us to get to the moon, and they can get there within a matter of seconds. So he says we're very primitive. He's also mentioned that we're very destructive. Mm. And one of the reasons they're coming back and trying to change is so that they can change this. They can change some of the anomalies that have happened in the humans. Warmongers, being destructive, hateful. What else? He had said something also about AI that, that we have to be careful. It can overtake us.
Yes. And basically, Fred also said that there are 3 characteristics of humans that they are trying to take out of our nature. One is arrogance, one is hatred, and the other is destructiveness. So maybe during the second month or so of our conversations, I had asked Fred to tell us exactly what their goals were for working with humans, and in particular with Robert, but others as well, because they are taking others. And so the gray may not be telling us the truth about this. It could be that they are using our DNA to further their own needs to, for instance, build up their population, because maybe they're dying out. We don't know. We only know what
they tell us.
Yes.
What Fred tells us.
And the book, 31 Conversations, is strictly a telling of what we heard. And it includes extraordinary events that continued to happen in Robert's life over the year that we were working together.
But by those same tokens, as I got friends that are in the science fiction space, I'm not saying that everything has to be based on science fiction or even along those lines, but there has definitely been a number of people, and I alluded to it earlier, that are concerned that there are a lot of people walking around that are listless, don't really have a purpose, to your earlier conversation, and don't really have a destiny. And you oftentimes will hear people talk about what they call the zombie apocalypse and all along those lines. So I just wondering, what is Fred and those that you have been having these conversations, thoughts around this notion of there being that kind of negative force that's out there as well? Because there are definitely a lot of people that are even concerned that not just aliens might be walking around us, but there also might be people that are not of the best class and are definitely having some of that zombie attitude as well. So just wondering what Fred's take on that narrative was as well.
Do you want to say something? What?
You answer that one.
Okay. Fred sometimes would say to me, I don't have an answer to that. Mm-hmm. He would say, I only know about Robert. I only know about what I am doing as a retriever and a protector. So I would try to ask him questions about, governments and the future of Earth, etc. And then I would it's almost like he was scolding me. Mm-hmm. He would say, you've asked that before. That's a repetitive
question, he would say.
Question. And so we didn't actually ever get to the subject of AI. Maybe once you remember, This is 31 conversations. I've just started going over the first 2 or 3, and so that I can very honestly give the public exactly what was said. I want everyone to know that this is exactly the way it was. I'm not making anything up. We have these on audio. Mm-hmm. And so, so I wish I could report that Fred gave us all sorts of great information about other subjects, but
Fred was very straightforward. He never gave up any information. You would have to ask him. And sometimes, a lot of times, he would say, I'm unaware of that.
Yeah, he'd just say, I don't know. I don't have anything to do with that. I asked Fred, how many others they were working with, like they were with Robert and Fred. And I shouldn't say he, because he didn't have a gender, but we kind of felt like he just had a masculine quality.
Energy towards them.
Yeah. And, right. Fred would say, we work with others, but not all humans are able, they're weak. Humans are weak. They can't withstand the physical and mental and emotional that we put them through.
The rigors.
Speaking of that weakness, there is a theory. I'm not saying that I buy the theory, but there is a theory out there that some of our elite are part of those that are in better contact with those that are from another planet than the common man, and all along those lines. So in your conversations with Fred, was any of that discussed as well? Because I do know that there are some people that will think that some of our elite are more in touch with those from other planets than, say, the common man from Durham or Arizona or wherever else we might be watching this from and everything.
Fred did mention that our not only our government, but many other governments around the world are being influenced through other types of extraterrestrials, and they're gaining more than the humans are.
Yeah.
But that's, like I said, he wasn't very forthcoming on information.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he would very rarely would he ask Christy a question.
Yeah.
It was always the opposite. And tell him about Santa Claus.
Yes.
So Fred wanted to know why it was that humans don't believe in extraterrestrials being here. Fred said, "Do I have to put on a red suit and ride in a sleigh pulled by reindeer before people will acknowledge that I am real?" Yeah. And I have to say, that was the only time that I laughed at Fred. I thought that was hysterical because Fred was always very pedantic. He would always just say exactly the answer, boop, boop, nothing more, like a robot.
Right.
Very robotic, actually.
And we found that odd that he asked Christy a question that, what does it take for humans to believe in us, our existence?
Yeah. Fred would
just out of curiosity, Christy, you mentioned, and we've talked about it during this course of this interview, some of the things that Robert went through in his past life regressions, but I was just wondering, what past lives have you seen of yourself and everything, and what are some of the lessons that you learned from those past lives?
Oh, well, I love that question. Yeah, I don't mind talking about myself. I had a really distinct past life when I was doing my training in Arkansas.
Hold on one second. Just keep telling the story.
Okay. I saw myself as a very primitive man. I was a cave dweller, and I had basically fur. I was male, and I was covered with fur, but I felt like I was partly human. I had a mate who tended to the fire in the cave, and we had others of our species who lived in the cave with us. And at the time that I was under, I remember that I was standing outside the cave, and I looked in the sky, and I saw spaceships. And so I then went forward in time, and I had two offspring, my mate and I, and they were told never to go to this one area, which was, it seemed like it was to the side and way behind the caves. It was a deep, cavernous area. And we told our offspring, our two children, never to go there. It was dangerous to go there. I don't know why, but that's what we said. But one day they did go there. And when I went to search for them, because they'd been gone too long, I saw them being taken by whoever was on the ship. They were taken by the extraterrestrials, and they never returned. And that gave me such sorrow. It was a very, very emotional life. I would go to that same area over and over and over for the rest of my life, and my mate would come with me, and we would just wait and hope that our offspring would be returned. And they weren't. They were never returned. We died without ever seeing them again. And in this lifetime, I did have, this tragedy of my child being taken from me. So it was fascinating to me that I would have that same sort of experience.
It paralleled your life now.
Paralleled my life. And another one, I didn't actually see this lifetime, but a very good friend of mine who was quite psychic, I had put her under hypnosis, and she saw 3 lifetimes. And then she said, "Wait, don't bring me out. I'm seeing another lifetime." And she saw herself as a little girl being born into a bordello in Wichita, Kansas in the 1800s. And as she was telling me this story of herself being a child of one of the ladies of the night, I got to thinking, that feels very familiar to me. I think maybe I was the madam. Oh, that's silly. That's silly. That's my ego talking or something. But when she came out of that story, she looked right at me and she said, "You were the madam." And that made sense, not because I'm not a lady of the night, not even close. But I have had the experience of renting out rooms to women over the years as a single person, and I had a big house, and so I felt so comfortable having other women live with me in a cooperative way in my own home. And other people thought that was a little strange, but to me it was just ordinary. It felt very familiar. So that past life explained it, because I had this big, beautiful place and evidently owned a lot of land and so forth. So those were my two.
Yeah, those are very fascinating. Definitely going back in time like that and all in that space. So that was very fascinating. I'm sure our listeners were interested in hearing about that and seeing how that had impacted you and all in that kind of way and everything. So definitely, I'm sure folks are being very fascinated by that. Just out of curiosity, because I know a lot of times people are afraid of hypnosis and afraid of even the notion of hypnosis. So at what point did you become a hypnotherapist, and what is your ways of alleviating people's fears? Because as you noticed at the beginning, I mentioned that we're getting ready to go into the new year. A bunch of people will be doing New Year's resolutions, and some of them may be using hypnotherapy as a way to accomplish their New Year's resolutions. But I was just wondering, what do you say to alleviate people? Because some people are, I'm not going to go under. I don't want to be turned into be making chicken noises, and I don't want to be doing embarrassing things to myself, and all along those lines. So how do you alleviate people?
Well, I can say what.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick. I had the same concerns. Was I going to say something stupid? Was I going to say something wrong? Good luck trying to put me under and stuff like that. But it was very peaceful. It was very peaceful, and I got what I was seeking out. So it was extremely beneficial. And then afterwards, I was like, I want to do this again. Because there was, like Christy had said earlier, we got answers, and then there was far more questions than the answers that we got. So it was very therapeutic.
I can say thank you. Yeah. Oh, it's life-changing. It was life-changing for me too. Everything looks different to me since I have had these conversations, and since I've bought so many books now by people who've had abductions, who've gone through that, because I want we're definitely going to start getting together with others in groups who've had abductions. But I can say to people who might be leery of hypnosis that a hypnotherapist who has a conscience and is doing this as a service towards humanity will never plant any expectations in the client's mind. When a client comes in, I put them at ease by letting them, certainly encouraging them to talk about themselves, their needs, their intentions. And then it's a very soft induction where I count them down, and they slowly get out of the way as far as their conscious mind, and they allow the knowledge to surface that's inside of them, that's carried inside of them. So everything that they learn under hypnosis lives within them. This is not something that I have any control over, nor do I want any control. I'm not a medium. I'm not a psychic. I went into this because I could see what good it can do, but it's coming from the individual. Whatever you need to hear and you need to see and know, that's what you will access.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just coming back to something else that is, we've talked about sound, but there's another part of hypnosis that I think is very important. It is also an important part of the notion of even alien abductions and all along those lines. I mentioned that I have a friend that's been in that space, and he oftentimes talks about the mysterious lights that exist here in North Carolina. And of course, there have been, I think you both mentioned the lights that have existed as well, and the orbs and all in that space. So I was just wondering, how much is light a part of the conversation with both hypnosis as well as alien abduction? Because I've heard people even talk about these mysterious lights and orbs that people see and all along those lines. So I was just wondering your take on that, because I know here, once it's the mountains of North Carolina, we've got some that are totally unexplained, and some people think that it is from a alien culture and all in that space. But I just wanted your take on the importance of lights and recognizing these orbs when we see them.
Lights and orbs.
Lights and orbs.
Yes.
I see a blue light constantly over my house. Wherever I go, I've seen it. Friends are always saying, neighbors are saying, why is that blue light over your house? What's going on? So, yeah, if you're seeing an orb or different types of lights that are not in the normal capacity of light, it's something's probably happening. You go with your gut. I tell myself all the time, go with my gut instinct, because it's not gonna lie to you. Your gut instinct is most of the time gonna be right on, and usually it is. I've captured many of blue lights on my phone, and I've asked astronomers, is this a star? It's like, no, can't be a star. Stars can't put out that blue light. It's too much energy. So, yeah, if you're seeing something over there in North Carolina and it's a weird looking light, it's probably something other than this world.
Sounds like it. Definitely, I've got friends that have definitely seen those kind of situations, everything. Now, you mentioned that there are, I think you said 31 or 34 conversations, everything. What is something that you think the general public will be shocked to learn? You've kind of alluded to some of them, but what is the most shocking things? And this is both you, Christy, and Robert, that you are thinking people will gather as the book is coming out and people are deciding to obtain a copy of this book. What are some of the more profound lessons? Because a lot of times these books are about profound lessons that you feel people will get from these conversations. And this is both you and Robert.
You go first.
You go first.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. I think that as the reader experiences these stories, that they're going to kind of feel like they've been turned upside down, because speaking to an alien makes you feel almost, I was thinking about this earlier today, it's sort of tantamount to people finding out that they're adopted, and they realize that they thought they were they came from these two people, a mother and father, and then they find out that, oh no, they came from these two people over here. So what does that do to their identity? Because for me, finding that I probably am a hybrid, not as clearly as Robert is, maybe there's only a tiny percentage of DNA that's alien, but just knowing that, and knowing that the aliens have so much power over us, really changed me. It's like, okay, then why was I born? And does it matter if I'm a good person? Does it matter if I'm spiritual or evil? And the love I feel for people, what difference does that make? I began to have all of these questions on this particular level that really threw me for a while. And finally, I decided, okay, the bottom line is I'm lucky to be here now, alive. I am very fortunate to have my wits about me. I'm very fortunate to have people to love and to love people and animals and to appreciate plants. I just am now going to respect every moment of my life in a whole different way, because it's not just by some accident that I, Christy Andrews, came to be. this is something so much bigger than me and so different that I'm just going to really appreciate everything even more.
With me, well, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say I wanted to hear your answer, and I had a question based on something that Christy just said and everything. But definitely go ahead with your answer, Robert.
With me, it's finding out that we're not the only ones in this universe. There are quite a bit. There's a lot of different types of extraterrestrials out there. So when people get to see or hear or read about the book, they'll find out we are not the only ones. We're only a speck in this universe. We're a small cog in the machine.
Yeah. But in along those same lines, it comes back to that's where I was going, even with asking, particularly what Christy just said and everything. There's this notion, and part of it is a religious notion of humans being the top of the pyramid in humanity. So I just wondering your conversations with Fred and maybe other encounters that you've had, your thoughts around that, because I'm one of those people that actually thinks that there are some very smart life even in our animal kingdom, and that sometimes we don't give them as much credit as they deserve and everything. Not just those that are perceived as being super smart, like the dolphins and some of our fellow clan, if we want to believe that we are fellow primates and everything. But even I would argue that even cats and dogs can be very intelligent. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine, and they were talking about how even cats can be trained, because literally my brother was in a parade, one of those Christmas parades, and there was a group called Bike Derm, and on Bike Derm there was literally a cat that in all that hustle and bustle, speaking of Santa Claus and all those kids making that noise, that cat was perched on that gentleman's shoulder without making any kind of noise and seemed to be doing all right. So I'm thinking that cat, one, had to be a little bit smarter than people give cats credit for, and two, apparently that cat could be trained, because literally it was in the middle of a parade with loud bands, Santa Claus, and the whole 9 yards. But the segment of the parade that I saw, and I was watching on YouTube, at least 5-6 minutes, that cat was not budging that much and everything. So I just wonder, do you think that we don't give our fellow animals and fellow plants as much credit as they should get?
Yeah.
Tell Mark what Fred said about ants.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, I want to say that I totally understand about the intelligence level of pets, and I think we're bringing them along. There's so much to say about that, but I have 2 cats, and they certainly understand me, and they when I want to take them to the vet, I can never find them, because even though I don't say I'm taking you to the vet now, they hide and they stay hidden. Sometimes I have to cancel the appointment. I can't find them. They know. Yeah. They know things. So there's a lot of telepathy, I think, that goes along with animals that we can only guess at. But Fred told us very specifically, and this was very strange timing. We had a session on Friday, and Fred mentioned that we think we're so smart. We think we're at the top of the pyramid, and so forth. But in fact, ants are more socially developed than we are.
They have a more cohesive society.
Yes, a more cohesive society. They work together beautifully, and they don't kill each other. They don't harm each other. And so they're more advanced than we are. So we love that. But what was really exceptionally interesting about that is that then that same weekend, I saw an Ancient Aliens episode that focused on ants. Wow. and their, how they work with each other.
Their unique society and how they work. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yes, that's a great question.
Yeah, if you were saying that, I was actually thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, ants are much more uniform and have a more cohesive society. Now, there's some other insects that aren't all that great, because I do know that there are certain bee societies and there's certain other societies that are not all that great in terms of the way that they treat their males, because they will let you copulate with them and then kill you instantaneously afterwards, and all along those lines. So there are some of those cultures that exist that might be more harmful than the human population and everything.
Is that the black widows?
Black widows, yes.
They eat the male?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do what you want to do, but afterwards I'm going to get my revenge, apparently, all in that space. you just mentioned it because you mentioned the TV series or the movie Aliens and everything. And in my mind, and I was wondering your thoughts and even what Fred's thoughts around this were, was there seems to be two kind of narratives that exist heavily in our pop culture, which is the very kind of tyrannical or kind of dictator kind of image of the alien, whether that's Terminator or whether that's Aliens or whether that's the Borg, if you want to go to the the science fiction kind of background. And then there's the more ambivalent kind of like the Alf and the ET kind of aspect of Aliens as well. But it seems opposite extremes. There's either the aliens that are coming to pretty much destroy the Earth or the aliens that are fascinated and in wonderment by what's going on here in society and don't know what a Reese's peanut butter cup is and all along those lines. So I just wondered their take on the portrayal of their own species. And of course, the Greys have never been portrayed as far as I'm known, but they might have some portrayals that are based on them and all along those lines. But I was just wondering their thought around social media and particular media in general and how it portrays aliens.
Portrays, yeah. We actually never particularly touched on that subject, but there is a book out, and this is, you might be interested in this. It's all the extraterrestrial species that this particular author had identified, and there were something like 80. And I've heard since then that there are over 100 that have actually been identified. And in this particular book, there are portrayals. You see pictures that have been drawn of of all the different types of aliens. And I had no idea there were so many different looks that that extraterrestrials might have. The Greys are the best known. Why?
More popular known.
But why they have been outed when all these other species of extraterrestrials are unknown to us? It's kind of a mystery. Maybe they're just more abundant in number, and they've shown themselves more times. They've been sighted more times.
Fred did mention about the reptilians, how they're more of a destructive type, more of a type that cares for themselves.
Well, the reptilians, he said, that we've all heard about, right? I'm sure you've heard that term, Mark. So the reptilians were the first species of extraterrestrials to be on Earth. And so they have this sense of ownership, like, this is ours and you're not supposed to mess with it. And so they have been destructive. They were the ones who actually attacked Robert when he was in gray form. Yeah. And that's the incident that stimulated his incarnation as a human. So, we know about reptilians, we've heard about Greys, and then there are all these others who evidently exist because pictures have been drawn, because people have seen them in the flesh, except it's not flesh like ours.
You mentioned earlier, because you mentioned both of you consider yourself, and that's what my friend considers himself as well, being a hybrid species. And I do know that sometimes it can be hard to relate into those, I guess, that are more human form and all along those lines. So I was just wondering the intermingling between hybrids and aliens, as well as those that are 100%, and I imagine it's like races. There's probably nobody that's 100%, just like there's not hardly anybody that's 100% Latin American or 100% African American or 100% Hispanic American. So I imagine it's the same with aliens, since the society's been going on for a while. And so probably everybody has a mixture of one sort or another. But how much does it play in terms of interpersonal relationships and everything? Because I do know that sometimes it seems that some of my friends that are more in tune have a harder time in their day-to-day existence, even their work existence and their relationship existence as well. So I'm just wondering how much has that played into your own existence, as both you, Christy, and you, Robert, in terms of being able to relate to folks, whether it's kids, whether it's spouses, whether it's coworkers, because of the experiences that you've had.
You wanted to speak to that?
Yeah, it has played a part. You know, it's kind of hard to explain. I do a lot of things by myself. It almost seems like that mirror image when I was in gray form, where the grays always, they don't socialize with the scientists. Everything is done just by them. And it seems like my life has been similar to that, doing a lot of things, especially now, of doing a lot of things by myself, being by myself. And that's what Fred and I would do when we were, so it's almost like mirroring that past life.
Mm-hmm. That life as a gray.
You know, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I know a lot of people too who feel like they're not completely human, that they're from the Pleiades, for instance. I have a good friend who always says, I know I came from the Pleiades. And I haven't really questioned her as to why she says that. Exactly. But she is definitely a very strong person and with strong ideas and very accomplished in life, confident. And as far as my life goes, I think that I've always felt a little bit on the outside. Never really thought of myself as an alien or having alien DNA. I didn't know why. I just thought maybe it was my parents' blood type. Maybe they were
keep talking, and I'm going to be right back. Got to answer the door.
Okay. So I think that many of us have a feeling that we don't quite belong in society the way others seem to.
Yeah, I always thought I was an outsider.
Okay.
I was always that really quiet one, sitting back where no one noticed. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And that seems almost what Fred would them do.
Mm-hmm.
They would never eat and never converse with the aliens. That's what he said they would always eat separate. They would live separate, right?
Yes, absolutely. And something you just said reminded me. Fred told us what they eat. They don't have teeth.
No.
They barely have a mouth, but they don't have teeth. And so
it was like a porridge, he had said, huh?
Yes, a porridge. That's right. So totally a liquid substance made from plants grown on their planet.
But had everything.
All the nutrients that they need, and they drink it, basically drink it once a day, and that's all they have to eat. They don't have 3 meals. They don't chew their food. They drink this porridge, and once a day, and that gives them all the
substance and nutrition that they need. Yeah, and the scientists would be separate, and the grays would be separate. Yeah,
I've forgotten about that. There's so many things that Fred said that I'm going to be listening to again as I write this book. And I hope that people understand that it's all exactly as we heard from Fred. And also, I just want to mention that I do have this other book, and it's called Discovery, the book 1 of the Legacy series. It's also a true story. It's written like an adventure novel, but it's a true story. And so there is so much beyond what we see and what we can feel and in our tactile world, so much that's happening that it helps us so much to go into an altered state of consciousness because we can become aware. I mean, I believe, Robert, I believe you have found all the answers that you needed, and things are still coming to you.
Yes.
Not from Fred anymore.
No, no, not from Fred. Fred did mention that everything that happens to us in our life will be stored in our body, in our cells, in every cell in our body is like a Kodak. It'll be stored in there.
A Kodak,
Yeah.
That's right. I remember that phrase because that's not a normal term.
No. So yeah, but it seems like I've paralleled my life, especially now, as if I were back in gray form.
Gray form.
Yeah.
And it's it's interesting to note that towards the end of our conversations with Fred, he gave you that that news that it had been decided that you, after you're done with this lifetime.
Yes, he called it a life cycle.
Life cycle. And didn't you say recently that you heard that maybe it's another 10 years of life?
Yes, there's 10 years left in the life cycle, and I will be put right back in, but I will be looking a little bit different. A lot smarter, hopefully taller and more handsome. So we'll see what happens in the near future.
So during the conversations, Fred, I would say to Fred, Robert would like to let you know that he would prefer, if and when he comes back, he would prefer to be tall, dark, and handsome, and very smart.
Yes.
And Fred later asked me, Fred said, what is this about tall, dark, and handsome?
What's the relevance of it, huh?
Yeah, what is the relevance of that? Why does Robert ask to be tall, dark, and handsome in its next incarnation as a human? So I had to come up with an answer. Well, that's just sort of generally considered to be attractive by humans.
Hey, just really quickly, because actually the person that dropped by, he dropped off some gifts for me and some of my coworkers, was a gentleman that used to have a church here and all along those lines. And I know one thing that we had said we are going to get to, and we've only got a few more minutes to go and everything, is to those people that think of hypnotherapy as being sacrilegious, what is your argument with that? Because I do know that there's a lot of things even around hypnosis and even around myrrh and other things that are very much new age in a lot of ways, but some people might think of it as being sacrilegious. I don't necessarily think of that because, like I said, I consider myself more spiritual than religious, but that is something where people will dismiss certain things, whether it's hypnosis or other things, as being against religion. So I just wanted your take on that, Christy, and what your answer to them is.
Well, first of all, I have been a church musician most of my adult life. And so I was at a church as the music director for some time. And everybody knew that I was a hypnotherapist. And nobody really knew that I wasn't religious. They didn't really ask me, but they liked the way I played the piano and directed the choir. So it didn't matter that I was a hypnotherapist. But the minister began to come to me for hypnosis on a regular basis. And it was very, very helpful for her psychologically. She was disturbed by her, many events in her childhood. And so we addressed those through hypnotherapy. And, you know, she always said to me, don't tell anybody because they'd probably fire me. She was the minister. And so she came, but she didn't want anybody in the church to know. Because, yeah, people have this idea that somehow it's sacrilegious. I don't feel it's sacrilegious.
Nor do I. It was an enlightenment.
And you were raised Catholic.
Catholic, yes, very much Catholic.
Very strong.
Baptized and everything, you know, the Holy Communion and everything.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't think one bit of it being sacrilegious.
And it's not like, maybe people have this sense that there's the devil involved or some evil force. But if you look at hypnosis from the point of view that it's whatever we see from our past lives comes from within us, then you can relax about it being evil or sacrilegious. It has nothing to do.
It's not like playing with a Ouija board and you're going to have evil spirits coming in and telling you what you did in the past or what's going to happen or so forth. It's nothing like that. It was so beneficial.
And also I put protection around in the room and around the session and around each of us. And I ask for light and protection. And even though we had these conversations in my house, I've never been afraid that I'm going to be abducted and something bad happened to me. I just
and
feel.
Fred also said, you never have to fear.
Yeah, I guess he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he also said that he would never harm you.
Yes.
But you were, I would say, harmed on many occasions.
That's their interpretation and our interpretation are two different things.
A little bit different. But sacrilegious.
No.
It's all in your own interpretation, but honestly, I feel it's getting in touch with the most sacred part of ourselves.
And apparently the Vatican, and I did go to a Jesuit university because I went to Marquette in there in Milwaukee, so I know a little bit about the Catholic faith, even though, like I said, I was not active in that faith all that much, but I did go to the school there because, as I jokingly said, you pretty much had two minors when you went to a Jesuit university because they required us to take 21 hours in theology and philosophy. I think it was 9 hours in philosophy and 12 hours in theology, or vice versa. But either way, 21 hours, that's pretty much a minor as far as I'm concerned and everything. So definitely it was having that minor, and it's also probably the reason that I have a one of those well spread kind of good educations and all along those lines. And definitely is something interesting because I just saw that, I guess it was 15 years ago, that the Vatican's chief astronomer said that there was no conflict between believing in God and the possibility of extraterrestrial brothers, perhaps more evolved than human. So that's actually what Jose Gabriel Funes, who at that time was 45, so I guess by now he'd be around 60, he says, in my opinion, this possibility of life on other planets exists. And he was the person in charge of the Vatican Observatory under and scientific advisor to the Pope Benedict and all along those lines. So apparently there are people even in the Vatican that believe that this possibility exists and all along those lines. So definitely there are even folks in that religion lane that are thinking, hey, we can't be the only ones here. One thing that I've always been curious about, and I don't know if y'all talked about this or what Fred said about this, is sometimes there's this notion of like planes and like this whole notion of purgatory and other things. And some people would say that where the aliens are located at is more closer to heaven than we are, and all in that space. So I just wondered if you got a sense in your conversations, this notion of life and death and mortality and all in that space. Because I'm wondering if aliens have funeral rites and if they live and die, much as the way us on the human planes do. And if they do they have a sense of a heavenly plane, or is there not as much of a conversation around heaven and hell the way that there is here in Western philosophy and Western thought? But I just wondered y'all's take on that and whether that came up in the conversations also.
You want to answer that one?
After
the 3 life cycles?
Yeah. Well, will you tell them how long Greys live? Tell them. Because
Greys have a life cycle of 800 years, and they can go for 3 life cycles. And after the end of the last life cycle, their energy can go where they want.
It just disappears. Basically.
It goes out of that avatar body, because the Greys are made in the ones that I've experienced or I was. So they, after 3 life cycles, they don't have to come back into a Grey form again. They're almost set free.
It's like a free.
They have free range of what they want to do or where they want to go or what they want to become. So it's not like they're going to have a burial or because they have no emotion. At least these ones. My cousin during a session asked if there's a heaven for humans, and he had mentioned, I believe he said that we also have the right to go where we want, and we want to be reincarnated, we can, and our heaven is what we make it. Everybody's heaven, he said, your so-called heaven is what you want it to be. It's everybody's heaven is different, basically. Does that kind of get close to that question?
No, that actually answers the question. It's interesting you said that, because I've had various guests of different sorts, everybody from creatives to folks that have gone through different life lessons. And one of my past guests actually had made a trip to what is considered heaven, and what you just described is kind of what their answer was, as I recall it, because they said that when they went up to heaven, they saw really almost like mini neighborhoods. So that whole notion of like my way, the highway, which we know some religions believe in, everything was different than what they saw. They literally saw Muslims, Buddhists, different people of different races, religions, and creeds and colors. They were all they're on heaven's grounds and everything. Now they might have been in different sections, but they were all in heaven's grounds, and that is the way that they perceived it in their experience when they had one of those can call it out of
near death experiences.
Near death experiences. Thank you. Right.
Interesting, because in my hypnotherapy practice, what I do with past lives is the person sees a past life. They see several very important experiences during that past life, and then they see the last day and they see their death. And they watch as the soul leaves the body and floats above. And then they're free to go on to another incarnation. But most recently, in the last couple of years, I've asked people to just stay in their spirit form and not be in a hurry to reincarnate so that they see another past life. And people are seeing some pretty outrageous things. They'll feel or sense that they're just a light, just a ball of light. And then different things happen to different people. But usually there's an experience where they join with other spirits that are balls of light. And there is a sense of euphoria, so that it is perfection, it is glory. Assign any word that is just beyond us in this material world. And that is the ultimate. And they can stay in that state for, quite a while. And then they'll go into another lifetime if they're going to see another lifetime. So I love to think that what we're going to experience after we leave our body is bliss and euphoria. Why not?
That's what I'm hoping for as well. Like I said, not in a rush to get to that state, but as the old saying goes, nobody knows the date or time, just like nobody should be making judgments other than the people that should make the judgments at the end, which is the most high and all along those lines. But I'm definitely one of those people that believes that nobody knows the date or time, and I'm not in a rush to figure out mine. I'm sure there's a book of life that explains it all and everything. I've got three quick questions and everything. One is a lighthearted question. The other one is actually dealing with something the network talks about all the time, and it is the question that I get everybody to answer, and hopefully we'll get short answers. But this has been a fun conversation, and all along those lines, my lighthearted question, and I'll direct this to you, Robert, and maybe you can find out for me from Fred, but I am very much involved. My brother got me involved in it in fantasy football. I've been doing very horrible in fantasy football, so I need Fred to find out who the winner is going to be next year so that I do better in fantasy football. And if he wants to get me the winner for this year's Super Bowl, I won't argue with that either, or the lottery number. So if he can make the arrangements for me to find any of this stuff out and all along those lines, please let me know, because I think I was like 2-14 or 2-13. I only won 2 games, and that was against my brother, who introduced me to the game this year, and the commissioner of the league. So at least I can take victory in the fact that I beat 2 important people, namely my younger brother and the commissioner, and all along those lines. But the rest of the year, I was doing very horrible. It doesn't help, Robert, when the first player that you draft is Aaron Rodgers, and we know what happened to Aaron Rodgers in that first game and everything. So I was going downhill from that point. So if Fred can give me the answers, I would love that, and all along those lines.
Sounds good.
And the other more serious question that the network talks about, and we've kind of alluded to it a couple of times, and I'll get to the final question for both you and Kirsty and everything, is this notion of what we teach and what we don't teach. And I know that they're big on physical literacy, big on us teaching some things that are not taught, including even some of the skill sets like vocational skills and other things that used to be taught but aren't taught as much as they used to be. So I was just wondering, for both of you, do you think that we should do a better job of teaching metaphysics and teaching about just philosophy in general in our school systems? Because a lot of people would argue that these kind of conversations that we've been having, even this one we had this evening, have not been discussed enough from our school kids. I was just wondering y'all's take on education and whether these kind of topics should be taught to our folks, at least in high school, and maybe even as far back as junior high and elementary school. But I just wondered y'all's take on that.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I know that the Waldorf schools teach different religions to all the children. So if you go through from K to 12, you are you're exposed to the philosophies of the religions, and they're not trying to convince anybody to become a Buddhist or Hinduist, but they just it's part of their education so that they are knowledgeable, so they can make their own decisions. And I think it would be a fabulous addition to our education if the idea of the hypnosis and mediumship and any metaphysical subject at all could be introduced, because some children are feeling like they're on the outside or that they're crazy because they have special abilities. And if those were actually acknowledged, and then they wouldn't be afraid anymore. As a matter of fact, it might make a huge improvement to their life if they realize, oh, I just have special abilities. It's not just because I'm weird. So yes, I think that our educational system is very limited to, the tangible.
Yeah.
The education is huge. And do you remember what Fred told you one time in a session? My gift to you is my knowledge or my education, he said, right?
I've forgotten so much of what he said. That's why I'm looking forward to listening to the recordings.
Yeah, I remember he said, my gift to you would be either knowledge or education. So it's huge.
Yeah.
It's education and knowledge is huge.
The truth, whatever the truth might be, and we disagree on what the truth is from person to person. There's no doubt about it.
That's okay.
But if we could offer more possibilities and then let people choose from those instead of having, instead of, very, very, okay, if you don't believe in the Catholic faith, you're going to hell. That's not helpful.
Such a rich platform.
Yeah, not helpful at all. And part of it is what we alluded to at the beginning, which is that there is this notion that if you are thinking outside of the norm, that you must be crazy or that there must be something wrong with you, and all along those lines. Because I do think that there are probably some young people that are suffering, because we know the rate of depression is tremendously high among our teens and among our young adults. And part of that might be some teens, even to both of your point earlier in this conversation, that they might have been either abducted or gone through different other experiences, whether it's hypnotherapy or other things, where they were being told that they were out of the norm. And I sometimes think that it's perfectly fine to be less than what is considered the norm, because sometimes the norm is overrated in my mind, because sometimes it's all right to be a little bit out on the edge and to be a little bit abnormal in some senses and everything, because sometimes that can actually be some of the true marks of genius in my mind and everything. Some of the greatest people, some of the greatest people that were out there, whether it was Einstein or Jefferson or even George Washington Carver, if you want to go into the African-American culture and a number of other things, literally they were deemed to be crazy in their times. I think Galileo was even seen to be crazy as well, but we know that we're still benefiting from the things that they discovered and all along those lines.
Well, what about all the women?
Right. Exactly.
Because they had psychic ability, because they saw beyond, because they gathered together and they toned and they got information. That's in my book, Discovery by Christy Andrews. It's on Amazon. 25,000 years ago, there were medicine women who were in touch with the spirits of the ancestors, and they healed people, and they had their special abilities, but they were revered in the tribe. They were
matriarchs of their society.
And they were the matriarchs. And so now women are second-class citizens, as many ethnicities are considered as well. And that's just wrong. We're all humans and we are all one.
Yep. No doubt about that and everything. Well, the last question I get everybody to do, and that's where we'll wrap up with it. Like I said, I hope to get you back on in future conversations. By the way, Kim Calhoun, who is one of our founders along with Nick Palveda, that's actually what she talks about, because she will sometimes reclaim a certain word and everything, which is that notion of being a witch and all along those lines, because she definitely feels that it is sometimes a word that is mispainted and misused, because a lot of those folks were very much scientists, and she is an engineer by trade, and we're having as y'all both said, a great deal of respect in their society. And sometimes you just got to reclaim words, and I think she's been reclaiming that word witch, just like some people have been reclaiming a word that is affiliated with a lady dog as well that rhymes with witch, and some people have been reclaiming that, just like they've been reclaiming the word that is an offshoot of Negro and all in that space. So definitely sometimes you got to reclaim the word so that they don't have the negative meaning that some people want to.
Yes, the stigmas attached to the stigmas to words.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Exactly. But what I get everybody to do on the show, and you've kind of alluded to it all during this show, is if Christy, if you can tell how you can be reached, and if Robert has anything that he wants to pitch as well. I don't know if he's got a side business or anything along those lines in addition to being your subject and everything, but if he wants to share that, and then I get all of my guests, and I'll give you all the full screen to do both of that and everything, is a message of positivity and hope, because Pod TV is a global network, which means that we are heard both now as well as when it re-airs several times during the course of the weeks and months ahead. And I know with all going on in the world, whether it's the wars, the pandemic, and a number of other things, I just take it as my personal mission to try to give words of encouragement to our listeners, and then hopefully they can pass it on, and we can just create that positive light, because I hear that there is a shift in the forces, and I'm trying to do my part to help in that shift and everything. So any message of positivity and hope, and any ways that you can be reached and been in touch with, and I'll give you all the full screen.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. You're not crazy. You're not crazy at all. See a hypnotherapist, and you'll see what had happened or what transpired in your life. And if it's not with Christy, seek another therapist that might be in your local area. But yeah, go out and seek a therapist, and you'll find out. And once again, you're not crazy. I'm not the only one that this has happened to. There's got to be thousands and thousands of people, and your listeners probably there's quite a few of them that it's happening. So no, you're not crazy, and seek out a therapist. That'll help.
In working with Robert, I have become aware that a lot of people are dealing with abductions and not having any idea how to feel about it and how to keep their lives balanced. So my hope is that more people who need some answers will seek me out. I work out of Tucson, Arizona, but I also do virtual sessions so that it can be safe to work under hypnosis while we're on Zoom. And so I'm at ChristyAndrews@gmail.com. And I
spell it out for them.
Yes. And so I don't know if my name is on screen. I think it is. It's KRYSTE, Christy Andrews, ANDREWS @gmail.com. And talk to me. Tell me what your experiences are and why you would like to work with me, and what your intention is, what your need is. That's what I'm in the world to do. We all need to come from love. We all need to understand that we all are one. So Robert's experience is my experience, is your experience, because if Robert feels a certain way, we're all feeling that way to a degree. We are all impacted, just as we're all impacted by the wars going on in our world. So do not let yourself get down and get depressed. There are answers, and they're all inside of you. So if you want, let me help you bring those answers out. You'll be very relieved.
Well, I greatly appreciate this conversation. Look forward to seeing you both back on in the near future and everything. We'll go out with a couple of PSAs, but definitely it's been a enriching conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it. And I think that we got some great insights and all along those lines. And hopefully I'll get y'all on a return trip in the not too distant future, sometime in 2024, since we're almost done with 2023 and everything. But definitely have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot, and definitely opened my eyes to some possibilities as well. So looking forward to hopefully having y'all back on a return trip. Might even get you on my friend's funk show, because like I said, he is the person that believes that he is a member of the hybrid class and all along those lines. I know he's done some
Great, thank you.
in that space as well. So definitely going to get on out of here, but look forward to seeing y'all in the not too distant future.
Thank you. This has been wonderful, Mark. Thank you so much for the atmosphere that you create. It's
Thank
really,
you.
really
No
beautiful.
problem.
We felt very at ease,
Yes.
didn't we?
Yep.
Happy holidays too.
Yeah.
Happy holidays to you as well.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
All right. No problem.
Bye.
Times of transition, whether from a sad event or a joyful one, can leave us feeling adrift. Social connections are an important part of a healthy life. Being isolated and lonely can be harmful to your health. It can lead to high blood pressure, a greater risk of heart disease, and early onset dementia. So it's important to build and maintain connections to people, not just in your family, but others whose relationships bring meaning to your life. Trying a new hobby, volunteering, exercising, even using your phone or other device to stay in touch with others. All these can be great ways to keep up your social connections and your physical and mental well-being. Visit connecttoeffect.org to see if you're at risk of social isolation and find ways to get connected. This message is brought to you by United Healthcare and AARP Foundation.
In our daily lives, we make many decisions. Life is made up of choices that may seem insignificant at the time, but add up and affect our lives in the biggest ways. Like the health of your heart. Heart disease is the #1 killer of women. Making the right choices can reduce your risk. Choose to see your doctor. Choose fresh, not fried. Choose to walk. Choose to live. Make the choice to beat heart disease at GoRedForWomen.org.